So Steve, just as feedback, will you, because we don't have it in writing, you read it to us, will you just put it in writing and so that we can look at it for our next meeting, perhaps adopt it if that's what you're looking for us to do?
Sure. Yeah, I can send that out to everyone in the email thread that we have.
Or if you have it written, share your screen. I just I caught what you said, but not, I was trying to write it down. But just
Yeah, I'll email it out for sure.
okay.
It's easier. So maybe by next meeting, we can adopt it as you suggested.
Thank you.
Unless there's any comments on that, I'll just go to the next item. All right. The next item is the airport update with the NBRC grant. As many of you know, we won a very competitive grant. It was a federal grant that was administered to the Northeast border states. And we won about $200 some odd thousand that we have to come up with a match for. The match is about $50,000. And the purpose of this is to do the engineering and building plans of a new airport terminal building, which we've been discussing for about 2 years now. So I won't go into the reasons why it's needed. Basically, we've missed, because of the previous administration, a couple of deadlines. So I spoke to the EMDC person that's now responsible for administering the grant funds to us. It's Vicki Rusfeld. She's going to basically be overseeing a lot of these things that we'll be submitting so that it can be done correctly. They have a lot of experience in making sure that the forms are filled out right, so we're not, having to constantly come back and fix problems. This was something that I was hoping the new CID director would be able to take on. Obviously, there were some ridiculous issues with that position. So we're kind of waiting longer than I anticipated for that. So Peter, technically this is an administrative issue. So I can forward you some of that paperwork and you can decide how you want it to be done. I can copy Vicki on it as well, who is aware of kind of our situation. So that way you're at least familiar. If you would like anyone else to take that on for the time being, it's really just filling out a form that says that no activity has been done up until now, to my knowledge. So there isn't a lot to be done because we also haven't received any funds yet. So it should be fairly straightforward. I just can't submit it myself, obviously on behalf of the town. So I'll forward you that. Also on that note, I had thought that it might make sense to seek some of that match funds from the newly appointed or designated airport land. There's a significant amount of land surrounding the airport that we had passed a few months ago, designating it as airport land. There's currently people out there harvesting wood off of another lot that's nearby. And I know that Jeff has reached out to them to see if they'd be interested in harvesting the airport land. And Jeff, I guess you could speak to that briefly if you'd like.
Sure, Steve. I reached out to the contractor when we were going over our plans for allowing them access to their property, Katahdin Forest Management. The contractor, Lee Russell, is out there currently cutting wood on land owned by KFM. So I discussed initially if he would have any interest in cutting the trees where we plan to put hangars, which would give us a stumpage fee, which we could use towards this match fund. Now, I don't know how much that, how much revenue that would be, but in discussing it further and thinking about it further, we may be able to get them to clear the backside of the solar power section on the Elks land, as we're going to discuss later. If they could do that, I mean, 20, 25 acres or more of land back there to, to cut that in preparation for that system being put in, that would also generate revenue. And as a side to that, I attended the Maine Aeronautical Advisory Board meeting last week. And the new infrastructure bill that the federal government just passed has a terminal building line in it. So what I was thinking, if we can stay on top of this with a new community initiatives director and so forth, that we should be looking at that very closely, because hopefully they won't have the restrictions that normal federal FAA money has on terminal buildings. That way we can build the building we want. And if we show them that we have the commitment by going after the grants that we have, plus the matching funds that we've already gone through, that maybe we will be competitive in getting money for the rest of the terminal building. So that's where I'm at right now, where this particular project's concerned. So I have not met yet with Lee Russell. Again, he says he is definitely interested in cutting trees for us and paying us stumpage. I just don't have figures for that yet. Hopefully that.
Thank you, Jeff.
That's as up to speed as I am on it right now.
Thank you. Does anyone have any comment on that? Louis, you're muted. I thought you would say something. I was looking right at you.
I'm sorry. Given the building materials market, the pricing, sooner the better for cutting this wood.
Yes. Yeah. At least the part by the hangars, I want to have that done in conjunction with this one they're doing now. That way this spring we'll have that land cleared and can move forward with those projects. Because right now on our plan moving forward to rebuild the runways in 2023, it's also a 500-foot extension on that taxiway, which will be in front of those hangars, those hangar lots. So if we can get this all worked together in the next year or so, with the hangar projects and the land projects, we may be sitting good to start marketing those lots. Which I still have 6 people on the list to build hangars here.
Great.
And to that, I know that we had already passed an order on the council level authorizing you, Jeff, to seek bids basically for clearing the land.
Yep.
We've talked about the bid process before on the council level, and typically don't like it when we only just offer one person a job without really looking at others. So if it's possible to reach out to a couple other people to see if they'd be interested in getting a rough number from them, I think that would be the best practice.
Sure.
I'm assuming it's going to take a little bit of time anyway to hear back from these people anyway. So I suggest reaching out to maybe a couple more.
Now, clarification on that, wasn't that something that the manager and I were supposed to be in, basically do that in conjunction with each other, work together on that? So I'll probably have to talk to Peter about that and get together and do that. So, I mean,
I believe the way it
I'm
was,
sure he's totally unaware of this, but I'll bring it up in my meeting with him next week.
yeah, the way it was worded, I believe it said manager and or airport manager.
Okay.
But
Okay, but
I think it makes sense to do it together anyway.
Yeah, but if it's and or, I think we should work together. Sure.
Yep.
And Jeff and I
agree.
have some time set aside early next week to talk, give more detail about airport stuff. So we can go over that then.
Great. And on that note, it doesn't hurt to obviously put an RFP out on the website or in the local paper, just to make it as public of a process as possible.
Sooner the better.
Any other comment or thought on this?
No, I would just say I'm just really encouraged by that, Jeff. You've thought about that and the land that's available and the fact that you have 6 people waiting for hangars to be built. So I think kudos to the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Exciting about this. Yeah.
Thanks, Jim.
Yep.
All right. With that, we'll move over to the discussion of the fire station building and an update on the Elks property. Obviously, this has been oddly a recent contentious issue, despite the fact that we've been discussing this for over a year in this committee and on the town council level. The, the public is always encouraged to participate in council meetings and committee meetings. From my personal perspective, it's very frustrating when members of the public decide to step in at the last second with a tremendous amount of misinformation that's spread all over, because it really does harm and damage to all the work that I feel that we've done over the past year, when we've been incredibly open about the process and very public with the process. So I encourage those who have any strong feelings about anything that the council or committees are doing, that they first ask questions, that they participate in the discussions, and that they get some of the facts before they start basically slamming all the work that we as volunteers of the town, who spend, at least for myself, over 20 hours a week offering free work to try and benefit the town, to hopefully show some respect in that regard, and just listen and ask questions before coming to conclusions and spreading misinformation. That would be incredibly appreciated. On that note, in terms of getting facts and information, I'm just gonna go through the proposal that was posted on the town website. This is a draft proposal for the committee to review and discuss right now, and I have a couple suggestions that I'll mention after. Peter, are you able to share that? This was an attachment to the email and also on the town website.
While you're
Under the
getting that
committee
ready, Steve, I've got a point to make regarding your frustration with the public. I would think that if we could, utilize Cat TV and or Zoom in some way to make the recordings of the meetings available through the websites and other media outlets, so that people who don't know what's going on have a chance at a later date to review our meetings and discussions.
Sure. Yeah,
Can I pick
that's
back up
partially
on
why.
this for a second?
Sure, go ahead.
Just, adding on to what Louis said, I know we've talked about it in the council about doing a rework of the website to make it easier for people to find, committees and everything. If we do end up doing that, including the recordings under that said tab would not only be beneficial, but if we include a section for when the meetings are, and the Zoom links and everything, I think that also would help, because I'm hearing from multiple parties that they're having an extremely hard time finding where to go to get the committee information that don't have Facebook. I know we posted over Facebook and everything, and I've heard positive feedback about that, but the website apparently is a huge issue.
That's why I mentioned Cat TV for the elderly population as well.
Yep. I mean, it's definitely something that we should all be striving for. It's difficult, obviously, when there's so many modes of meeting and how to share that information. I know a lot of people don't have internet, so there's that issue. A lot of people don't have computers. A lot of people can't or won't attend in person. A lot of people can only watch on TV. So I guess it's, for each committee, I guess it's unique in terms of how it would be approached, but I think we should all strive to do as much as we can to be accessible. With this meeting in particular, I had asked Peter to record it so that it can be posted, so that people can review this, whether they're able to participate or not during the time of the meeting, so that they have the information, can see what we talked about. Obviously, it's a little bit different than just reading some minutes, and hopefully it can be a little more informative. So Louis, your suggestion is having Cat TV screen, or at least
Their current mode of
committee
operation.
meetings.
Their current mode of operation is recording on some disk and then airing at a later date. which, logistically wise, works out for them. They don't have a camera to do any live broadcasts or have a different type of recording, digital recording other than a CD, a video disc. But anyway, even that would be better than nothing. But we haven't been getting any service from them for the last 2.5 years here. We really need to either put a little more money into it and make it easy for them to provide the service, or what's the money being spent on. I know we've given them $10,000 to $15,000 and have not had a bit of service since.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that we should address on the council level. It's been an
Yes.
issue that's come up multiple times.
And they could cover more than just the council meetings. These committee meetings is something that they should be able to do for us as well.
I agree entirely. Well, can everyone see the
Yes.
shared document here? All right. So here's a draft proposal again. This is something that the committee would have to look through, and I don't expect us to make any recommendations today. But this kind of lays out kind of the plan that we've talked about thus far. And there's a comment here already from Ada and Gotti, I believe. Does the town currently hold leases with any businesses? Are you suggesting, does the town lease any land or any buildings to businesses? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay. To my knowledge, I don't think we do. I know that we did lease out property at the airport terminal for a while. There was an office space that was rented out, but it's not ADA accessible, and it has other issues associated with it to where it's not really legal to rent it out. Is anyone else aware of any other spaces?
Other than the hangars that I have that are leased, like to West Branch Aviation and Noise Enterprises. I lease 2 hangars out here for businesses.
So what will that cost us in insurance to protect the town from a lawsuit if you're a leaseholder?
The way that works on the airport leases is that the business owner has insurance on the premises and has liability insurance, and the town is named insured. So it's covered.
Is it different because you're federal and not state or municipality, or are you all three?
I am a municipal operation owned by the town, and we are federally funded for major projects with also oversight of the DOT. But no, we are a town operation. It is a department of the town. And all of these agreements and leases have been in effect for more than 14, 15 years at this point with no issues, and it was all drawn up by the town attorneys.
Okay, sounds like it's covered.
Thank you for your questions. And nice to see your face, Gilda. It's been a while.
Yeah, really.
You're looking good.
Thanks. For an old lady.
We're all getting there.
All right. So getting here to the proposal, again, this is a draft. We're looking at about roughly 112 acres total. You can see the map below, which is not official. That was me just making a sketch showing you the general area. The asking price from Elks is $260,000, and there's a couple reasons for that. One, the Elks is divided, has multiple chapters and a state level and a local level. The local level owns that property downtown that requires a bunch of work on their roof. So a portion of the funds they're looking to recover from the property sale would go towards making those improvements to their downtown property. The other portion would be paying back the state chapter who fronted the money initially. I think it was around $98,000 or so that they purchased this property for. So it's basically being divided between the two groups so that the state recoups their money and the local chapter can make improvements to their downtown building. That's how that number was negotiated. The current assessed market value is between 110 and 125,000. That's again a rough estimate. The reason that that varies from the 14,000 or so of what it's assessed for is because it's currently zoned differently than it would be if we were to develop it ourselves. Right now it's developed as or zoned as tree growth. With that, it has a much lower tax value. When you change the zoning and you change the purpose of the property, it changes the market value of it, and therefore also the property value and how it's taxed. So the market value is quite a bit higher than what it looks like on paper and the current use that it has right now. It's still about 100,000 or so below the asking price of purchasing it. Again, I spoke to the reasons why Elks is asking for that that price point. I don't know why my screen just went completely black. That's very odd.
You in the dark there?
I say now I see Peter's screen still.
Okay, well, I guess I'll keep speaking. I just got to pull up that document again here. Sorry about that. I think my computer just died on me for no reason.
We still see it here.
Yeah, I'm just going to pull up that document so I can read along with it. So we're looking at multiple revenue streams for this property. Although the asking price is quite a bit higher, when you actually look at what we would be taking in and how much opportunity there would be for future expansion, it kind of paints a different picture of that price point. I know it sounds like a lot up front, and we've talked about this, like I said, for the past year or so, and discussed why this would be a good asset for the town. As the property sits right now, there's about $50,000 to $60,000 worth of wood on the property that could be harvested. So right off the bat, we can take off that price. So it basically bring the price point to $200,000 when you include the value of the wood. On top of that, the town had signed a 40-year lease agreement with a solar company. The solar company has identified the site, as you can see on the map, that would border the airport property. And it's titled Solar down there. That lease pays $1,000 an acre per year, which would bring in $25,000 a year of revenue in the lease agreement because it's a 25-acre development, which would total $1 million over the course of the 40 years. On top of it, the town can also tax that solar array. That solar array will be estimated to be worth $20 million. So on top of getting the $25,000 a year in lease agreements, which just that alone would pay off the $200,000 remaining in 4 years, we would also be able to tax the solar array for the course of the 40 years. The state has been constantly changing the tax rules regarding taxing solar developments. So Lorna Thompson, who's our assessor, has been keeping up with all of that and has not been able to give us a clear, definite dollar amount of what we would be able to receive. But obviously any revenue at all from being able to tax that solar array is positive. On top of it, the solar company is willing to make other improvements to the property that we otherwise would have to incur in costs. For example, they're willing to build a road, an access road from Central Street all the way into the airport property, to the standards of DOT or the FAA or whoever would basically need to sign off on it. The reason that that's significant is not only is the cost of developing a road very high, one of the reasons, which we'll get into, we want the fire department to be located on this site is because of its ability to access the airport property directly. If the airport were to eventually receive larger aircraft, especially if there were commercial aircraft, there has to be an on-site fire department. If we do not have an on-site fire department, we cannot operate commercial flights or larger aircraft that require it according to the FAA rules. So if the town is to get grants or federal infrastructure money to pay for a new fire station building, what we discussed in this committee previously is that we should plan for the future. And if we put this fire station anywhere else in town, it will inhibit the future growth of the airport, among other reasons. So the solar company's willingness to make additional improvements into the property also extend into putting fencing around a portion of the airport property as well, which is another FAA requirement when you start getting into, I think it's Part 139 operations. Is that the right terminology, Jeff? Part 139, I think?
Yes, exactly. And I did check with DOT and FAA on this. That road from the fire station to the airport does qualify us as having on airport fire service.
Thank you. And I'm just going to go through these next 2 points, so then anyone can ask questions or have further discussion. So the solar array alone would pay off the remaining value of the asking price within 4 years or less. What we could do there, and it would be my suggestion to the committee, is come up with a plan that, or a policy that any revenue associated with this development would first have to pay off the balance of what we owe Elks. If we take out, for example, a bond or a loan, that it would first have to pay off the balance of that bond or loan before it can be assigned to any other purpose for the town. So that's something that we can discuss. I also recommend that the solar portion of the property be administered as, or designated as airport land as well, considering it borders the airport land, and it will also extend the airport property to be closer to the fire station as well. Going into the fire station building, we've already talked about the need for a new fire station building. It was built in the 1930s and has an incredible amount of issues that are not only not worth fixing, the building itself is too small to host any modern fire apparatus. And we also have so much equipment that we can't even store it all in the existing building. That's just a very brief summary of why we need a new building. The town already owns existing engineered building plans. Those are already paid in full by Great Northern back in the 80s. The reason that's helpful is because in today's market, that value is probably somewhere around $500,000. Getting building plans for a building of that size, especially for its purpose, is incredibly expensive. So we're already in a good position to own those plans. It also positions us better to start going after federal grants to pay for a new building because we already have the plans. So basically we can act very quickly. And part of the reason we want to acquire, at least what we've discussed here, of acquiring the Elks land in the near future, is that infrastructure money is coming out very soon. And if we don't have a property and where we can put the fire station, along with the building plans, it could basically delay or even take it off the table altogether, getting funds to pay for the new building. The reason that, and I've seen this come up, Peddler's Hill is not a good location, which we discussed with Tom, the fire chief, multiple times, is not only is the visibility bad in its location in terms of being up and downhill, making it a difficult place to maneuver in and out of, it's also within the, I don't know what the terminology, Jeff, would be, but it's within the airport descent area. Could you give me a better terminology than that?
Yeah, it's the clear zone, the approach zone.
Okay,
It's
so the approach
lined
zone.
right up with runway 16.
Yes. So if we build something there, there are height restrictions that don't allow you to build up to a certain height. If we put a new fire station building on that lot, it could potentially be too high for the approach area. And what would that do, Jeff? That would make us either eliminate the runway or shorten it.
Yes, we'd have to shorten it if they go too high.
Okay. So those are a couple of
Those are
reasons
what
why
they
Peddler's
call-
Hill.
Yeah, those are what they call 20-to-1 slopes. For every 20 feet beyond the end, you can only go up 1 foot. That's why we're constantly trimming the brush around the airport to meet those needs.
Yes, the airport spends roughly $10,000 a year on trimming the trees just to comply with that height restriction. And that basically sums up the fire station. The remaining portion of the property could be used for economic development purposes. There is an enormous need for those who have participated in the housing studies and other studies that the town has done, or is just in touch with the community in general. An incredible need for housing, whether it's rentals or for single family homes, for elderly housing. There's also an incredibly aged infrastructure when it comes to storefronts and other places to rent. I know multiple people who want to open up businesses in town, and there's just no ideal location, either because it's not within a price range that's affordable, or because the owners, the landlords, are not willing to lease out property for particular uses, whether it's food industry or other. So there's a big restriction already, as there is. So for opening this up for economic development, especially being along Central Street, we can not only lease and or sell the property, but we can also then tax whatever developments would be built there. So it would basically be a long-term revenue stream that the town would have. A lot of the towns that have been facing the similar kind of issues, especially Belfast and Bar Harbor and other towns that it seems Millinocket's kind of following a similar trend. The towns don't own almost any land within its borders, and other than parks and things like that. And the difficulty with that is it makes it very hard for a town to respond to the changing needs of the town. When there's housing shortages, when there's other services that aren't being able to be offered, a lot of these other towns basically have their hands tied because they have no land to be able to offer anything else. So the other benefit in the long run for the town, and I'm looking 50, 100 years into the future, which is what I believe the town should be doing, having excess land like this will allow us to respond to those different needs. Being a municipality, we can also subdivide and change zoning of the property without incurring any real costs. That is also a huge benefit for people who are like developers or others who want to put something on this property. Usually when developers come in to a site, they have to pay a pretty significant amount of money to change the parcel size or location, to go through the zoning process. It's a very difficult process. So if we own the land, we can very easily make these changes to fit whoever is interested in the property with little to no cost. With all that said, I can't really see anyone because I'm on my phone. So if anyone has any comment or questions, please feel free to speak.
I have a comment. Given that land abutting Central Street there, I believe that's highway commercial, so there's a lot of opportunities for different uses to fit in there currently. without having to really change zoning.
That's right. And it could also be done in a way that we could rezone it so the back portions of the lots have different zoning as well. So if the town or the planning board feel that high density residential is a big need, there is the possibility of creating high density residential zoning, such as similar to downtown zoning.
Steve, this is Peter.
Any other? Yeah, go
Uh,
ahead.
Now, maybe this has come up in conversation with Chief Malcolm, but is there any concern about the date that the engineering plans were created? You mentioned they were drawn in the 80s. I wonder if everything is current enough since that was drawn up. I wonder if it would have any effect on a new building.
Everything as it's drawn out should be completely usable in today's, basically with today's technology and building. Shouldn't be an issue.
Good.
Any other questions or comments?
Yes, Steve, I will just, comment that I really appreciate your overview that you gave again. It was very comprehensive. And the fact that, this committee, we're thinking about future planning. I think that is so important for the town.
Thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of municipalities struggle with the immediate issues too much that they don't think about the long-term, not only long-term implications of their decisions, but just the long-term in general. And the fact that today's issues will be very different than what the issues might be 50 or 100 years from now. Obviously, it wasn't too long ago that Millinocket was a very different place. And here we are with a whole different set of issues and needs. So to be as flexible and as supportive of any future changes as we can do, I think makes the most sense.
So Steve, I do have a question for Jeff, and maybe he can just comment. You talked about, in the future, if there were commercial flights, what is the potential for commercial flights to come into Millinocket?
Well,
I can speak to that. Oh, okay. Go ahead, Jeff.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, the reason I would speak to that, and obviously, Jeff, say anything you'd like after. I've been working on developing some plans already. The need would basically be similar to that of Augusta, Bar Harbor, and other small airports, Presque Isle, that receive federal funding to subsidize some of their costs. Medical needs are really high in the northern part of the state. Transportation needs in general are an issue in the northern part of the state. But the plans that I've been working on with Cape Air and also some other municipalities throughout the state would use much smaller aircraft that would not require any changes to the airport right now. It would be 9-seater. So basically when you're 9-seater, you don't need to go through security. You don't need to have the Part 139 requirements, which are very extensive. You basically have to have a whole operating manual for the airport, that you have to have all the procedures in place for basically any kind of issue, whether it's emergency or otherwise, have fencing of a certain height around the entire property and the on-site fire department and all those things. The best near-term solution to commercial air traffic, I think, is utilizing that smaller aircraft and connecting it to a larger market like Boston. There's also the possibility of connecting it to another main city where passengers can go through their security. So if we did a flight, for example, from here to Bar Harbor or here to Augusta, passengers can board without going through security here. When they get off the plane in Augusta, to then be transferred to Boston, they would go through security in Augusta. Obviously, it's difficult to predict what the need would be 50 years from now, but in terms of the more immediate future, I think that's probably the most reasonable expectation, if there is any. And Jeff, you can speak to that.
Sure, and my views on this are very similar. I think we need to start small, show that we have the commitment, start with the smaller planes and move into something bigger as the need arises. But everything that we do that's proactive, like on-site air firefighting and all the things we're trying to do, extend the runways and change the lighting and rebuild runways and everything, will lead to our commitment to the future of the transportation system. If we could get 3 flights a week in here through Cape Air with their new aircraft, or even that new electric aircraft, the Alice, we're going to be setting the stage for the future. We need to start realistically. We don't want to just start courting airliners right off quick. We need to start, conservative and start with a smaller airplane and work our way into bigger airplanes. And I think showing that same with as I talked earlier with the terminal building, if we show our commitment that we've already gone and gotten a grant and now maybe we'll qualify for federal funding to finish the project. I think this courting commercial flights is the same, looking at it the same way, using the same tactics to show our commitment, get the ball rolling, and then we can grow it from there. That's just my take on it, Steve.
Thank you.
Did you have any follow-up, Gene?
No, thank you. No, appreciate that.
Any other comment?
I would just share that a big push for when we applied for the MBRC grant to get the funding for the engineering plans of the airport. That need was also identified through the main economic development strategy that was released in 2020. And there's a big portion of that focuses on transportation, and airports were identified as a big focus within the next 10 years for improvements in terminals, and adding flight paths and such are a big part of that. So I think this is a step in the right direction for the future development of the town and the region.
Thank you, Brittany. And just to be clear to everyone, whether public members or not, when it comes to any of the airport development, the town in the past couple of years working on all these projects has only spent about $6,700. So I just want to make it very clear, although these big ideas that we're discussing right now sound like a lot of money rolling, we've only spent $6,700 on a very basic design for the new airport terminal building. Like Brittany just said, we went after NBRC grants to get over $200,000. What we talked about earlier in the call or the meeting was potentially using some of the funds that could come out of clearing the airport land to pay for the match that we would have for that. So ideally, we would be still only at a very little amount of money for a significant amount of progress. So I just wanted to make that known. Does anyone else have any comment or questions?
The only thing I'll say is I'm glad to see that you're starting and looking for what's going to happen down the road and starting small and show that we are committed to improve this is a very, very good sign as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you, Gilda.
Steve, this is Jeff.
Go ahead.
The other part of that, the other side of that is we haven't made a huge financial commitment to this yet. As you said, $6,700 for what we've accomplished so far. And on the other side of that coin, the CIP program, Capital Improvement Program, or the Airport Improvement Program system that we implement in conjunction with the FAA, that all of that money is actually purchased at basically 5 cents on a dollar. So for $500,000 worth of work, it cost $25,000 to the town. So that's money well spent as far as infrastructure upgrades. And in the last 14 years, we've done taxiway improvements, we've done parking apron improvements, we've done lighting, we've done instrument approaches, we've done tree cutting, we've done all the things to keep us up to snuff in the infrastructure world. So these things are all projects that are worked on by members of this this team, basically, that we work on all this stuff. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. No, it's helpful to point out. I think a lot of the perception of some taxpayers are when they see new equipment or new things happening that we're just raising their taxes for it, but that's really not the case.
No, in fact, that $500,000 machine that we got last fall, the snow blower, cost the town zero because the 5% match was covered by COVID money.
Exactly. Yeah. And then the other side of it is the wider implications of doing this and other sorts of projects. A lot of those who may have, little experience with moving around locations, looking for either new jobs or to start a new life or to raise a family, may not understand some of the variables that people look at now, especially younger people. To have a connection to a larger city or be closer connected to the rest of the world through an airport is actually a really essential thing. We are very much in the middle of nowhere, according to a lot of people. And if we don't have access to the outside world, it is very unlikely that we're going to be able to attract not only younger people in general, but to even retain a lot of the people that have grown up here and look to go other places. So the airport and the development of new housing and all the things that we're talking about have much greater implications for the future in terms of retaining a lot of the kids that have grown up here, giving them opportunities, places to live, and still remaining connected, and also attracting people who want to raise families or come to work for some of the new developments on the mill site and things of that nature. So there really are much greater issues that stem out of making these types of investments. It can be hard sometimes because it's a little bit more of an abstract thing, thinking about, people's decision-making processes. But it's definitely true for a significant portion of the state and most of northern New England in general, is their difficulty retaining and attracting younger people who are really drivers of the economy. So without keeping them here, I mean, it really does not create a good future for the town. So with this specific project, what I was going to suggest is, Peter, if you could, and if the committee agrees, if you could reach out to Mary Alice and get kind of two different options in terms of how we could pay for the land so that we can look at that and discuss it. Whether that would be a 20-year or 30-year loan or a bond, or if we have funds in the undesignated fund balance that could pay for it up front, so that we can really discuss those options and what those implications might be. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
No, I think that's a great next step. So, so Steve, so this is, elks are ready to sell. Is that what you're saying? They're just waiting. Have you heard from them? The town's heard from them. They're waiting to know what we want to do. Is that where we're at?
Yeah, so basically we have to either agree or not agree to the price. And in order to do that, we have to identify how we would pay for it. And the council has to make, obviously, that decision. So we would make a recommendation to the council on how it would be paid.
Well, I think looking to,
Go ahead, Gilda.
well, I'm just going to say, looking to Mary Alice to see what her opinion would be is a good way to start.
Thank you.
Yes.
Was
and
someone
I'll-
else commenting as well? Peter?
That was me, Peter.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm happy to look into that with Mary Alice.
Thank you. Are there any other comments, either from the public or from committee members? And Ms. Ngati, I'm not sure if you're on here, but I know that you had a lot of concerns and questions. Were we able to hopefully satisfy some of those concerns, or if you had any questions still?
I asked, would a new fire station on Peddler's Hill be close enough to the airport to satisfy the federal requirements to have a fire station at the airport? You could have a road come off the back right onto Midway Road and not have to access on Central Street. It just seems like an awful lot of money to pay for land that's not worth what they're asking.
Yeah, unfortunately, putting the fire station there would conflict with the height restrictions, as we spoke to earlier. And I don't believe that putting it there would be close enough access either. Jeff, do you know that answer?
I would have to look at it to see what the road has to connect directly with the airport, and I think we'd have to cross too many other properties.
Yeah, I don't think that would be considered an on-site department, but there's also the issue of the poor visibility of pulling out big equipment, especially when it's not going very fast at first, onto that section of Central Street because of the low visibility of going up and downhill in that area as well. It would cause a lot of potential issues.
Well,
In
So
my,
it is not.
whoops, sorry.
Go ahead.
In my opinion, the biggest piece of this puzzle is the revenue generator to pay it off, the solar farm.
Yep.
What's the name of the solar farm business?
It's called Dirigo, just like the state motto, Dirigo. Dirigo Solar. They're a company based in Maine.
Are they up and running anywhere else?
Yes, they've developed. If you go on their website, you'll see all the projects that they have up and running. They do a lot of projects on municipal sites similar to this. They also have experience doing projects on airports, which require a different type of panel because of the glare that can come off from the sun and how it could obstruct the view of pilots. So they have all that experience.
I really have an issue with fire station being the farthest away from our hospital, which could have a fire, and the response time for that, for the schools, for the nursing home, for the senior citizen, concerned seniors, it just takes it so far away from response time for the rest. It's great for the fire, for the airport, not so great for the rest of us in the community.
Well, I would suggest speaking and asking Tom Malcolm about that before jumping to that conclusion. We have discussed that multiple times here, and I would defer to him to respond to you. I don't want to speak for him, but that is something that we've addressed. And again, I would appreciate you asking about response time and those issues before jumping to any conclusions. Valid concern.
Yeah.
Steve doesn't have visibility of the screen, so you go ahead and start talking.
Yeah. I just want a little clarification. You did say that we have already authorized a lease with Dirigo for an airport solar farm.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's no hindrance there.
The other piece of that puzzle as well is the fact that we had looked at putting the solar farm on the hill behind airport cabins, and it did not meet the glare study requirements. So that's why we moved to the other end of the runway, which does meet the glare requirements for FAA approval.
That is correct.
Yeah.
And with the plan, that solar development and the value of the trees, not including the taxes that would be charged on the $20 million investment into the town, would pay off the property entirely within 4 years. So although, to your point, Ms. Ngati, about the price point, it not only pays off within 4 years, but now we're looking at another 36 years of taxing a $20 million investment, getting annual revenue of $25,000 a year from the solar farm, having a location for the new fire station building, having land for developing more housing and other economic opportunities, and obviously a whole lot more.
How many acres is this solar farm?
About 25 acres is the solar farm.
And they're only paying about $2,000 a month to lease this? That seems rather low.
They pay $1,000 a year for every acre. And within the industry, it's not very low because that land is otherwise not very usable for any other purpose. Excuse me, I'm allergic to cats. It's pretty common. Usually the price per acre that solar companies rent out are between $500 and $1,200 per acre a year, because on top of it, they incur the other costs. They have to pay all sorts of fees for developing it. They have to go through DEP processes, which are very expensive. They have to get approval from the transmission and ISO New England lines. They have to not only spend the $20 million, but also recover profits from it. And then they have to pay town taxes on top of it. So when you consider all those costs, both upfront and ongoing, especially for land that really does not have any other use, even for tree growth, it's pretty substantial in terms of the amount of revenue that the town would be able to get.
Can I get a clarification here on direction to Peter to get funding options for the from the treasurer? Could we prioritize options that don't involve increasing the tax commitment, from real estate?
Does that sound good to everyone?
Yes, that makes sense to me.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Louis.
You're welcome.
The solar
Are there any
company
other?
has to maintain
ahead.
the land.
Go ahead, sorry.
I said the solar company also has to maintain the land, which takes some of the burden of tree cutting off the airport. The maintaining of the tree height and the brush in that particular area, at least they'll be taking care of that for us.
That's correct. Any other questions or concerns? Well, if there are any, we'll be meeting again on this issue in the near future. So, and with that, we'll have other information as well. Obviously, Chief Malcolm had to step out, but I'm sure he'll be available for the next meeting. So Ms. Ngati, if you had any other questions pertaining to the location, you would be able to answer those more fully. Any other questions or comments on this before going to the next agenda item, if there is one? I can't even see the agenda now. Okay, is there a next agenda item? I don't see it.
ADU.
You have
What's that?
discussion on housing and accessory dwelling units.
Yeah, ADU.
Oh, right, okay. Yes.
ADU.
So in a previous committee meeting, Councillor Pelletier had inquired as to why we don't allow accessory dwelling units. Was it specifically for the new development, Louis, or was it throughout town?
Well, zoning precludes like B's and B bed and breakfasts, which are short-term rentals, in the new development residential zone. I'm not positive if they zoned out in-law apartments or something like that, which would be an ADU essentially. So I'm thinking that we could clarify that ADUs may be isn't availability on the rest of the zones, as long, they have the same limitations as any building structure going on any lot. They have setbacks to meet and height restrictions and so on. But to the extent that we can get additional housing units, every little bit will help. Given the postage size lots, lots that we have in this town, I don't see a whole lot happening in other zones than the most restrictive, new development, Morgan Lane, the R2s, I believe. If that's the case, maybe some serious consideration should be given to, the one accessory dwelling unit being added to those lots if they, again, meet the zoning requirements of setbacks and et cetera.
Thank you, Lily. I remember that I think in one of the last meetings, we talked about making a recommendation to the council to ask the planning board to review that particular issue. Does anyone have any comment on that?
No, this is Jane. I think that's where it needs to go, right? We're looking to have more housing options available, and that's just one strategy. So if it's the planning board that needs to look at that to see what the zoning is, that would be a reasonable next step, I would think.
Give them direction to the extent that, we want to increase housing availability. So what could be done with zoning? And they'd probably have to hold public meetings if they were considering changing it in the most restrictive zone.
Thank you. Any other comment on that? Okay. Peter, would you mind adding that to the manager's report so that we could get a straw poll from the council? And if the council feels that's a good next step, then if you could reach out to the planning board and ask them to take that up.
You got something, Jeff, to say?
No, I was waving to somebody that came through the door, sorry.
Yes, Steve, I will make that edit and add that to the.
Thank you. Okay. Is there a next item or is that it?
I believe that's it.
Okay. Well, I'll send out a doodle poll for the next meeting. Ideally, it will be within the next week or so, based upon everyone's availability, and also to give us enough time to review everything that we get from Peter, Mary Alice, and others. So, well, thank you to everyone for your participation, and I look forward to our next meeting.
Thank you.
Hey,
Take care.
I got runways to plow. You guys have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye, Jeff.
Bye.
Bye, Jay.
See ya.